faculty.
Aliens are taking over the school.
Now,
where are your friends?
it's spreading everywhere.
By morning, there won't be a human left.
No! From the writer of Scream.
There's nowhere to run!
The Faculty.
This is so weird.
Directed by Robert Rodriguez. Rated R. December 25th everywhere.
Hey, folks! We're back. Unfinished Business Television with another deep dive! I am your host, Jeff Gallashaw at Unfinished B2. And with me, as always, is my co-host, Andre Joseph of AJMX.
Usher would not survive 5 minutes with the Italian mob.
Okay, and that gives you a hint as to one of the actors in this week's deep dive. I picked for the month of October, my birthday month, by the way, The Faculty from 1998, directed by my nemesis, Robert Rodriguez. It's with a script by Kevin Williamson, cinematography Enrique Chidiac, and edited by Mr. Robert Rodriguez. I kind of have a small personal stake in this film because Jordana Brewster, who played the character of Delilah when I was a teenager, so was she. And we attended acting class together, you know? Yes, I unfortunately, right before we were supposed to have a scene together to practice for that week, she got As the World Turned, so I never got to actually act with her. So when after As the World Turned, she was in, what was it, the 60s miniseries? And then she had done a film, I can't remember the name of it. It was like a romantic film. And then she got this film. And this movie had so much hype behind it because you had the Tommy Hilfiger fashion ad, starring the cast with Aaliyah, and of course Usher. This was on the hot track because, Kevin Williamson could do no wrong at the time. He had, the Scream movies. Then he was doing freaking Halloween H2O. And then he was supposed to direct this, but he dropped out so he could direct Teaching Mrs. Tingle. And then you also had a lesson in hype because Harry Knowles hyped this film up the wazoo on his site, giving set reports because he has a role in the film. And he would talk about the day-to-day filming, the people he met. And this is where I really generally learned about hype because I was so excited because he was making it seem like this is a John Carpenter movie. And then I saw the movie, and it wasn't a bad movie, obviously, when I saw it, but it was like, yeah, this ain't no John Carpenter. Now, the storyline is basically about a school that is infiltrated by aliens who take over a host's body and make them unemotional and try to get others to fall in line. It's called The Faculty because it starts with the teachers and falls to the students. I saw this when I worked at a movie theater, so, I saw this many times. I think it's a good movie. I think it's a good mixture of The Breakfast Club and Invasion of the Body Snatchers, kind of an update, only taken, obviously, from a more teenage point of view. And you have an all-star adult cast. I mean, you got Jon Stewart, you got Salma Hayek, who I don't really know why she's here. She doesn't really have anything to do. I mean, I know Robert Rodriguez said he would cast her in every film he made, so I guess that's why she's here. But again, she doesn't have much to do, and she's kind of not cute until she's taken over by an alien, where she literally lets her hair down. So basically, she did the cliche ugly girl, pretty girl thing. You have Robert Patrick, who's a fucking powerhouse in this fucking movie, though kind of reminiscent of his T2 role. And he's always in shorts. I'm going to let that hang there. You've got BB Newirth in it, Again, not really a big role for her. Piper Laurie's in this freaking movie, And Josh Hartnett, who is on his Rise Star, plays basically the drug dealer scientist of this school. And he was attracted to this role because Robert Rodriguez told him, "You're going to play the coolest dude in school." So I'm just like, so apparently at Robert Rodriguez's high school, the drug dealers were the coolest. I like this film. I know it could have been better, but I ended up liking it, and not just because I know somebody in the film, or knew somebody in the film. I actually found it very entertaining. I found it a lot of fun. It's another one, just don't think too hard about it. You know, I mean, there's more to say in the trivia, but I say give it a chance. It might not match with today's sensibilities, and yes, Usher is in the film. Apparently he had a bigger role that was cut. So did Kidada Jones. Quincy Jones' daughter, she's cut completely from the freaking movie. Christopher McDonald puts in an appearance as Casey, Elijah Wood's father. Summer Phoenix, John Abrams from Scary Movie, played the killer boyfriend in that movie. And things that go with modern day and bad taste, Danny Masterson is in this movie. So Andre, tell me about your history with the movie The Faculty.
So my history probably started out like a lot of other people, the racist Tommy Hilfiger spots with the cat. There's no indication that this movie is going to be a sci-fi thriller. It's just, oh, here's this good-looking cast all posing in Tommy clothes and, you know, hanging out, all, you know, like they were out of Dawson's Creek. They're telling you about, oh, they're all in this movie, but nobody's really saying what this movie is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Coming out, I'm kind of intrigued with the TV spots and the trailers and seeing it. You know, it's this mysterious thriller set in a high school and alien invasion, like Invasion of Body Snatchers type of tale. Also, the fact that it was coming out 1 year after Scream was also kind of telling, because with Kevin Williamson, and of course it's a Miramax Dimension producing it, you're expecting kind of like this is going to be the Scream of this year. And so the night it opened, I saw it with my former best friend and my other friend who brought his girlfriend, who spent the whole time just making it blown. They didn't even pay. But I did. So I watched this thing, and a couple of things stood out to me. One, the audience hated Elijah Wood from the beginning. They booed his ass. And when he got with the girl at the end, being that he was like the one who doesn't get infected, they still booed him. Like, people probably want to walk out of the theater because of that. I remember Jon Stewart's death being pretty horrific to see. The alien itself, even though like the CG's stupid, it did look pretty damn scary. I got to admit, that's maybe one reason why I haven't really rewatched it that much, is because it very much reminds me of like the first time I saw The Thing. I was freaked out by the dog turning into the creature. So it's kind of on that. And even now, sometimes I get water bugs. It still kind of gives me that PTSD. So I don't lie about that. I really do like the drug scene where they're all testing to see who's infected, and I hadn't seen The Thing yet, so I didn't realize. I always thought that was the one thing that I remember most about the movie, and the whole quote that Elijah Wood makes about, oh, why won't the aliens just attack Earth? Like, oh, do you think it's going to be like Independence Day, or do you go for the back door? So obviously that Kevin Williamson, influenced by Quentin Tarantino language, is in there.
Okay.
It was my introduction to Clea Duvall in that film, and then I felt she was kind of typecast after that, playing the goth girl. Even though I guess that's how she is in real life, but I did like her in this movie. And I do remember that Robert Rodriguez didn't have the greatest experience on this because he didn't like shooting on film. It restricted him from the freedoms he had when he did El Mariachi, and he considered quitting Hollywood until George Lucas showed him the 3D cameras he was making and that he used to make Spy Kids, and then that kind of brought him back. Overall, I don't love the movie, but I do like that it was trying to take the influences of John Carpenter, Wes Craven, and putting it together into a movie that obviously was highlighted by its young cast, but it still was maybe slightly above average, but not like an instant classic.
Yeah.
And I've always bothered by the fact that, even though I'm not an Usher fan, that they overhyped him and he's not in. And then Kadada Jones, who's in all those Tommy ads, has nothing to do with this movie whatsoever. So that kind of weirds me out.
Well, this was a film I thought might have been better if it had a longer cut. I understand they want to streamline it. And, even though it's not a Miramax film, it still is in the hands of Harvey Scissorhands, sexual assaulter. Here's the thing with this film. First of all, they went to Robert Rodriguez because when Kevin Williamson dropped out, they were going to have George Huang, who directed Swimming with Sharks, make it. But then they gave it to Robert Rodriguez, and we didn't hear from George Huang until he did Trojan War with Will Friedle and Jennifer Love Hewitt. Yes, I know way too much about teen movies in Hollywood. I remember Clea Duvall playing the goth and She's All That. I think that was the first time I remember her specifically in something. And yeah, she did get typecast for a while. Then I think she kind of broke out of her shell a little, even though, I think, again, she's more of a producer, writer, director now than an actress. Though I'm just saying, Yellow Jacket, since you like bringing back people, just saying, she'd be welcome on that show. I remember I wanted to see Usher die in the film. I'm not gonna lie.
I feel like out, and then they just cut it because he had just started out at that time, so maybe they were worried it was going to be a backlash, box office wise.
Well, see, here's the interesting thing. You say Jon Stewart's death, but the interesting thing with this movie is that the teachers get taken over, and then once we're at the ending, we see they're still alive, except for Bebe Neuwirth, who I guess her character just totally got dried out, which also had the funniest scene to me in the movie, where they all, gang up on her, and they look like they're going to beat her down, and he's like, sniff this! And I was just like, what? That, to me, was the funniest thing in the whole film, other than when him and Josh Hartnett are running. And he's like, Elijah was like, what do we do now? And he's like, well, one of us is a decoy. And he just pushes him right out. I thought that was funny throughout the film. And, well, also, Josh Hartnett never gets contaminated. He gets his ass kicked, but he doesn't get... Because Elijah Wood kind of does. It gets into his skin, but then, the ending happens and he doesn't get fully contaminated. It was, other than that show Dead Like Me, the only other thing I really remember Laura Harris being in, other than the Canadian soap opera 15, is actor who I always think is slept on, Sean Hatosy, who played Stan. I thought, he was really good in it. I'm like, did Dwayne Martin have a contract with Dimension? Because what's he in this in Scream 2?
Yeah, at the same time. So maybe they're like, oh, you want to do a couple of days on this set? And he just came down.
I know Tisha K was like, and nobody hired me for any of these. So, let's see. What do I have in my notes since you already told? Supposedly, again, this is according to Harry Knowles, he told Elijah Wood about Lord of the Rings was being casted, and that prompted Elijah Wood to audition for, even though he didn't mention that Peter Jackson was mostly seeing English actors at the time. And also supposedly in one of his set reports, again, coming from Harry Knowles, supposedly Elijah Wood and Laura Harris turned down Pleasantville, starring in that film. Again, this is going by him. I will admit, I had this script before the movie came out. Because I don't know, I know you're from Staten Island, but in Manhattan, there used to be these guys who would, this was before you could get it on the internet, who would, yeah. So I bought it off the street. I did that with a lot of Kevin Williamson scripts. Forgive me, Hollywood and Kevin Williamson. I didn't know where to go, else to go. So, I had this script. I Still Know What You Did Last Summer. Again, I couldn't tell you which revision it was, though, because usually half of them would be like, there's some noticeable differences in this script. But, yeah, I was like, I had, I guess, a little bit of a personal attachment to this film. But unlike you, I don't think it's above average. I think it's probably one of the better films Robert Rodriguez has directed, actually. Because this kind of almost lived up to the poster and the hype that his films usually have. Because I believe it was like our friend Eric Cohen who said that Robert Rodriguez has these movies with these great looking posters, and yet the movie never matches how good the posters are. And
movies.
Yeah, and that is how I feel about most of Rodriguez's work. So I like to think of this as one of his better films. And obviously him and Elijah Wood formed the friendship because he was in Sin City and a lot of his other films. But did you know Jessica Alba auditioned for Delilah? And obviously she didn't get it. And Charisma Carpenter turned it down. It was offered to her. Maybe she knew about Harvey. And Gillian Anderson turned down the principal, Bebe Neuwirth's role. And originally, they wanted Sherilyn Fenn for Miss Burke. And
I could have seen that.
Yeah, because she's like the hottie teacher. And, Sherilyn Fenn, even though she hadn't been on screen for a while, she was still sought after. This is probably one of my favorite Famke Janssen roles, after
GoldenEye. And I didn't know that she actually wasn't Russian.
Well, see, I knew. I probably thought she was British, probably. But I liked her in this role after the transformation more. Like when she's like getting all in Zeke's face in the playground in front of, sexual assaulter Danny Masterson, who's now been taken over in that film. I'm shocked his Scientology self didn't say, no, it was the drugs that made me do it. Anyway, I said about Kidada Jones. What did I write here? Oh, one thing I noticed in the rewatch was that, spoiler alert, Mary Beth intentionally used all the drugs on the principal so they'd have no weapons. I just noticed that this time watching the film. I was like, this little chick is clever. And it just feels like so cynical because like the nicest character in this movie, of course, is the villain. In the end. Like I said, I like the film. Could it have been better? Sure. But it's good for what it is. I don't think kids today are gonna necessarily love it, But, I mean, it's a nice look back to the movies of 98 for, again, people my age who probably remember, like, going to the movie. I can kind of see why people didn't like Elijah Wood's character. He was kind of a pussy. It's, like, when they're running him into the fucking flagpole, I was like, this is just cruel, And then he's always so nebbish. Like, what was it? I forgot what scene, but then somebody said something to him and he turns away really fast and runs. I was like, what the fuck? And it was the only time I had heard of a masturbation flogging the bishop. Christopher McDonald in that movie. Shooter McGavin. And he even does the guns in that movie. Even though it's still weird because he has that same, like, it's like he was trying to separate himself from that movie by growing facial hair at the time.
Now he seems like that character, because you ever go on his Twitter, he has a Shooter McGavin Twitter page.
Let's face it, that's his most famous role in all his career. That's probably the thing he gets most recognized for. Nobody's sitting there, hey man, loved you and breaking.
But he figured it out by this movie he did with Judd Nelson, where he plays a cop. Judd Nelson's the bad guy, like, I guess trying to mess with his life. And Christopher McDonald, they make him look like a badass. Like, they make him an action hero in it.
I must see this movie.
I got to find the name of it. I'm going to send it to you later.
I remember he was in a weird comedy where he was an ambulance driver with another guy, and this was back in his blonde period. I remember that movie. I'm trying to remember odd Christopher McDonald roles that I remember him in. SLC Punk playing the father. I remember him in that. And I remember on that stupid show Project Greenlight how hard they wanted him to play in that Shia LaBeouf movie, and then they're like, we've got to settle for William Sadler. I'm like, settle? That's settling? So what is your final word on Robert Rodriguez and Kevin Williamson's The Faculty.
It's a couple notches better than Light It Up.
I would give it quadruple notches better than Light Her Up. Most importantly, less Usher. Not enough Rosario.
Away.
Yeah, not enough Rosario Dawson though, because if Rosario Dawson was in this movie, hey now.
No John B and DMX and NSYNC.
Well, thankfully, that was not on the soundtrack, but it did have a music video for their, what was it, that Pink Floyd song that, was it The Offspring? No, it wasn't The Offspring. I forgot which band remade it for the movie.
Yeah, I forgot too, but I do remember the video on MTV.
Though I will say, I love the beginning, the intensity of Robert Patrick's character coaching, and that Offspring song comes on. I like, this movie caught me immediately. I wish the film kept that intensity throughout, you know? So, like I said, I like it. It's not a favorite, but I think it's pretty good. It's a good watch, you know? It has its problems, but give it a chance. So, that ends this episode of Unfinished Business Television. Deep dive. So until next time, we bid you adieu.